Story 1. So, I have a really bad leg. I've had 13 surgeries, long story, and had just started at a new school. After the first 3 weeks, I had to go in for another procedure on my leg. It wasn't that big of a deal to me since I had been through it before. Upon returning to school, I had documentation of my restrictions, as well as special accommodations I needed. The big three were: I needed extra time to get from class to class, I had to have someone escort me, and I required unrestricted access to the elevator. These accommodations caused recurring problems, such as constant harassment by teachers and security about being in the halls during class time and why my cousin was out too. He was my escort since we had the same classes, and I have anxiety issues. While these first two problems were annoying, they were manageable. The real issue was the elevator. I was told multiple times that, for security reasons, I couldn't have a personal key because it shared the same functionality with the interior door keys. I wouldn't have had any issues with this if I hadn't been told there would always be someone on the same floor as my classes to open the elevator for me. However, this was untrue about 75% of the time. The lack of elevator access meant I was often stuck in the halls while other students were moving between classes, and I was consistently late because I had to wait for someone to come by and open the door. This also meant that I sometimes had to wait through the entire lunch period. Since I had missed a lot of school due to my medical condition, I couldn't afford to just go to lunch afterward. After about 3 weeks of missing lunch, I was fed up. So, I made one of the dumbest decisions possible. I tried to use the stairs. To give you some context, I wasn't on crutches, I was using a full walker. About halfway down to the landing, I fell hard. As lunch was ending, one of my friends found me, got someone to help pick me up, and carried me to the office. Another friend went to find my other cousin. The one who usually escorted me wasn't there because he was sick, and I was too anxious to have a stranger escort me. Once my cousin got to the office, he helped me calm down enough to give them my mother's phone number. Now, my mom has a fiery temper, but can usually keep a level head. However, when she heard I had fallen, she arrived in record time. As soon as she got there, she asked what happened. I told her I didn't want to miss lunch again, so I tried to use the stairs. That set off a reaction like a massive explosion. She immediately turned around and demanded that the principal and vice principal get in the office right away. As soon as the principal and vice principal walked in, she started berating them in a way that wasn't appropriate for most adults, let alone kids. When the vice principal made an offhand remark about my condition, things escalated. The local sheriff's deputies who provided security for the school rushed in and intervened as my mother physically went after the vice principal. We were escorted out, and after reviewing my file, the school realized my cousin and I shared the same address. This led them to conclude that I didn't actually live in the district. My grandmother's address had been listed because she looked after me until about 8 p.m. every day, and she was also raising my cousin after an issue with my aunt. They used this as grounds to expel me, telling my mom that I could be some other school's problem now. I was then enrolled at the school near my house, and I had to undergo yet another surgery to repair the damage from my fall and redo the work of the previous procedure. I gathered multiple statements from teachers as well as my doctors, and my parents decided to move forward with a lawsuit naming the vice principal, and the county school board. We were contacted by a lawyer who had won several cases against the school board, some of which went to the state Supreme Court. He offered to take our case pro bono. He was tired of going up against the board and believed that a case like mine might be the one to bring about real change. Fast forward 9 months, and I walked out of court with a settlement that covered all my medical procedures. In addition, there was written confirmation that the school would undergo a complete administrative overhaul. The principal and vice principal were to be let go, and their administrative credentials would be revoked in our state. At my new school, from day one, the superintendent and the head of the State Board of Education made sure the administration knew about my medical requirements, including my need for a personal elevator key. Story 2. This happened a few years ago when I worked at a hotel. I was initially hired as a maintenance engineer with simple responsibilities like testing the pool chemicals, replacing filters, and handling room maintenance. However, during the spring, I was reassigned to overnight security, while one of the night guards was away for 2 weeks of Army training. Luckily for me, the overnight shift paid a bit more, so I didn't mind much. As a night guard, my job was to keep the peace across all 6 floors of the hotel. This wasn't too difficult since I usually had a backup with me, so I wasn't alone dealing with rowdy guests if they caused any disturbances. One night, it was a Friday, and my partner had called in sick. We had a group of adults hanging out by the pool around 11 p.m., even though the pool had closed at 10:30. This wasn't new to me, so I walked into the pool area and informed the group of 6 that the pool was officially closed. I got a few grumbles and complaints, but they weren't in a hurry to leave, taking their time to dry off and head to the elevator. I noticed they left behind about 9 bottles of alcohol near the pool, so I cleaned up after them. No big deal. About 30 minutes later, we received a noise complaint from the 5th floor. Some guests were playing loud music next door. I told the front desk lady I'd go check it out. When I knocked on the door of the room in question, one of the people from the pool party answered. He looked like he could barely stand. "Yo, what's up, security dude?" he said. "Good evening. I'm here to remind you to keep the noise down. I can hear the music from across the building, and people are trying to sleep," I replied. "So what? Not my fault they can't sleep through it," he shrugged. "It will be your problem if we have to come back. We've got plenty of pilots and business travelers staying here who need their rest," I said firmly. "Get lost, kid," he snapped, slamming the door but turning the music down to a tolerable level. I shrugged it off and returned to my post, checking in with the front desk. I filled her in on what happened, and we waited for the next call. Sure enough, 30 minutes later, we got another complaint, this time from a different room, about the smell of smoke and loud music coming from the same room. I checked the fire panel, and sure enough, the smoke detector from the room I had just visited was disconnected. At this point, I was frustrated, but figured they were probably too intoxicated to care. I headed back up and knocked on the door again. The music quieted, and someone cautiously approached the door. I noticed they had stuffed a towel under the door, thinking it would stop smoke from escaping, which doesn't work. By the way, they were trying to hide what was going on inside. I stood there, visibly irritated, and waited for them to open the door. When the door finally opened, the light was off, but the strong smell of a certain leafy substance filled the room. "Can I help you?" the guy asked. "Yeah, we got another complaint about loud music, and the fire alarm in your room has been disconnected. Is everything all right?" I asked. "Get lost, we're fine. Why do you people have to be so nosy?" he replied. "Well, first of all, I'm here to make sure the hotel stays in order. Second, I'm one of the maintenance staff, so if your smoke detector is malfunctioning, I need to ensure it's working properly," I explained. "Well, you can't check it right now, it's too dark in here to see," he said. I smirked and flipped on the light. What I saw confirmed my suspicions. They had small bags of a certain green substance scattered around the floor, along with lighters and broken liquor bottles. That's when things took a turn. "What the heck, man? We're trying to sleep," the guy exclaimed. "It looks like you're doing more than sleeping. What's in those bags?" I asked. "None of your business. Now get out," he snapped. "I think it's very much my business. I'm kicking you out and finding the room for smoking," I said calmly. "Chill out, we're not even smoking." "Don't lie. I can see what you're doing in here. I could call the police for possession, but I'll give you a choice. Leave now, pay the fine, and find another hotel, or I call the local authorities, and you'll be arrested for possession," I said, giving them an ultimatum. "Forget you, rent a cop," he yelled. "You have 15 minutes to pack your things and leave," I said firmly as I walked toward the elevator. A few seconds later, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head. The guy had grabbed an unopened bottle of ale and hit me with it. I stumbled but quickly turned around, now furious. I'm not the strongest guy, but I'm solid about 5'8" and 250 pounds, so I can take a hit." I glared at him as he prepared to take another swing. This time, I blocked the bottle with my arm, pulled out my baton, and struck him on the inside of his knee, causing him to fall forward. As he hit the ground, I kneed him in the back and cuffed him. He squirmed and cursed, waking up several people on the floor who came out to see what was happening. The rest of his group panicked, quickly gathering their things and heading for the elevator. "Are you going to arrest him?" one girl asked. "OMG, he could arrest us too," another whispered. "No, he's a coward. He won't arrest you," the guy muttered. "I'm not going to arrest you," I said, "but I'll leave that to the police." We made it down to the lobby, where I placed the guy in a chair and told the front desk lady, who looked panicked, to call the police. I was pretty sure I was bleeding at this point, but the adrenaline kept me going. The police arrived about 35 minutes later. The officer looked at the guy and shook his head, recognizing him. It turned out the guy had an outstanding warrant in another city for possession, selling, assault, and attempted murder. Another officer arrived, and after confirming the guy had assaulted me, they took him into custody. We went back to the room and found more substances hidden in various places under the mattress, in the sink, and even in the toilet. There must have been several pounds of illegal substances in the room. Interestingly, a few days later, I found out the room wasn't even in his name. It was under one of the girls, and she, too, had an outstanding warrant, along with her friend who had been staying with her. It was one of the worst nights of my life, but in hindsight, totally worth it. My head hurt for a week, but there was no major damage, just a bump. Story 3. Quick intro. This story happened to me a few years ago and still makes me laugh. My parents are among the founders of a resort, and my father is the chairman of the board of directors. I've attended a few of the board meetings, so everyone knows I'm the son of the boss. I was homeschooled, so most of my friends are senior staff or people on the board, which, admittedly, is a bit sad. Cast. Me Noah, I look a lot younger than my age, and being 5'7" doesn't help. Dad and Mom. Fiancée Julia. Sister Emma. Manager Jack. Crazy lady Karen. I was on vacation with Julia and Emma. We were staying at my dad's resort for a week or two while visiting my mother. When we arrived, I noticed the parking lot was packed. It was midsummer and saw a few cars circling, searching for parking spots. My family has a few private spots, and I noticed my dad's car wasn't there, but my mom's car was. As we walked to the reception area, one of the staff members saw me and came over to greet me since most of the staff knew who I was. There were quite a few people in line waiting to check in. "Ma'am, Mom is currently in a meeting," the staff member said. "Would you like me to take your luggage to your room?" "Yeah, thanks," I replied. Julia kept a bag with our swim clothes in it. After a bit of swimming, we went to the restaurant for lunch. I had changed into a blue shirt, but was still wearing my gray swim trunks. My outfit looked similar to the waiters' uniforms, with the only difference being that mine didn't have staff printed on it. This will be important later. As we were chatting in the restaurant, I heard a woman behind me rudely call out, "Hey, you." At first, I thought she was just trying to get a waiter's attention, so I kept talking and eating with Julia and Emma, while I was chugging down some ginger ale after regretting trying my sister's food, which she deliberately didn't warn me was spicy, knowing full well I don't handle spicy food well. I felt someone grab my shoulder from behind. I almost choked on my drink and spat soda all over my sister Karma, perhaps. "You, gross," Emma yelled, while my fiancé stood up, concerned, ready to ask if I was okay. But before she could, Karen, the woman who had grabbed me, cut her off. "Babe, are you?" Julia started. "Hey, I've been trying to get your attention for a while now," Karen yelled. I'm generally calm, so I looked up and asked politely, "Do you need something, ma'am?" "Why are you eating with the guests and not doing your job?" Karen demanded. It didn't take long to realize she thought I was a staff member based on my outfit, but her yelling while standing right next to me was getting on my nerves. "Ma'am, I don't work. I began. "Shut up! I am a very important guest," Karen continued to shout. I tried to stay calm, but I raised my voice slightly. "Excuse me, I don't work here," I tried again. She slapped me. "Don't you use that tone with me, brat?" Her long nails cut into my cheek, leaving a deep cut that started bleeding. Julia went pale when she saw the blood dripping from my face, and Emma immediately called our mom. At that moment, the manager, Jack, was walking over, having heard Karen's yelling, but when he saw her slap me, he rushed over. "Ma'am, Noah, are you all right?" Jack asked, concerned. Jack had worked at the resort for a few years, so he knew me well. Julia pressed a napkin to my cheek to stop the bleeding. "Are you the manager? I want this staff member fired. He is unprofessional. I don't know why you hired such an idiot," Karen continued, pointing at me as if she owned the place. "Ma'am, he doesn't work here," Jack explained. "You're covering for him? I want you fired too." Karen's face turned bright red with anger. Just then, I saw my mother running toward us with 2 security guards. When she saw Julia holding a blood-soaked napkin to my face and heard Karen shouting at me, she looked like she was about to explode. Emma had filled her in on what had happened. "What on earth happened?" "Guards, arrest her," my mother yelled. "What do you mean, arrest me? Who are you to do that?" Karen protested, struggling as the guards held her. "I am the owner. You dare slap my son?" My mother's words stopped Karen in her tracks. I'll never forget the look on her face. She went as white as a sheet, her eyes and mouth wide open in shock. As the guards took her away, some of the other customers started clapping. My mother rushed over to check on me. She has always been fiercely protective of me, especially after I was homeschooled because of bullying in primary and middle school. She doted on me when I was younger, and that day was no exception. After we cleaned and bandaged the cut on my face, which required stitches. But don't worry, the scar faded. My mother told me that Karen had been charged with second-degree assault and would be spending the next month in jail. Story 4. My husband ordered pizza for us last Friday night. He went to pick it up with our toddler while I was finishing up a batch of brownies for a friend's party. Let me explain. The pizza place he went to has a policy that if you order online, you can skip the line when your pizza is ready, pay for your order, and leave. The whole process usually takes less than 2 minutes, even when the store is busy. So, my husband took our toddler with him, but he didn't bring anything to keep him occupied. This is usually crucial because our son is prone to meltdowns and is currently being assessed for level 2 autism. He walked into the store with our son, skipped the line, and went to the counter as per the store's policy. An employee, a young and professional woman according to my husband, saw to him immediately. As he was giving his name for the order, a middle-aged woman, first in line, started going off. The employee tried to explain the store's policy to the woman, but she wasn't having any of it. Noticing that our son was becoming overwhelmed by the woman's yelling, my husband told the employee to take the woman's order first, hoping it would resolve the situation. Unfortunately, it didn't. The woman, sporting a classic Karen haircut with blonde highlights, continued to lose her temper. She wasn't calming down and took her sweet time ordering, all while complaining and screaming. It was Friday at 5:30 p.m. in a busy pizzeria. The place was crowded, the lights were bright, and our son had nothing to distract him. My husband was doing his best to hold on to him while trying to fish his phone out. Cue the meltdown. Our son started screaming and flailing. The store, with its echoing walls, amplified the sound, and my husband still hadn't paid for the pizza. Plus, there were too many customers in the way to make a quick exit. He was honestly doing his best, but our son was beyond comfort at that point. The woman then shouted for my husband to make our son shut up already and refuse to order or let anyone else order until our son was quiet. Trying to stay calm, my husband explained that our son is autistic and overwhelmed, and it would help if she stopped screaming. Now, my husband was getting upset. He's usually a calm person, but at 6'3" and built like a linebacker, he knows that if he raises his voice, the woman might accuse him of being violent. So, he kept his voice steady. He said he saw sympathetic glances from others, including the cashier, which was appreciated in such a stressful situation. But the woman wasn't done. She screamed, "Well, you shouldn't take such a disabled child out of the house." At that point, the store went silent, except for our son, who was still in meltdown mode. I'm glad I wasn't there, as I would have struggled to hold back my anger. The woman smugly turned around and tried to continue ordering. Then, a man whom my husband described as even taller and clearly a bodybuilder tapped the woman on the shoulder and firmly told her to leave. She tried to argue, but the employee backed him up, telling the woman to leave and refusing to take her order. The woman stormed out, still screeching. Meanwhile, my husband was able to calm our son down within minutes, thanks to an episode of *blue eye* on his phone. He paid for the pizza and left the store just a few minutes later. It's interesting how quickly our son calmed down once the hostility was removed. As my husband was leaving, the woman was waiting outside, presumably to yell at him some more. But before she could say a word, the same man poked his head out the door and warned her not to even think about it. My husband nodded in thanks and quickly made his way to the car. To the man who stepped in to help, "I wish I could meet you and thank you personally." To the screeching woman, "Let's never meet again." Story 5. A few years ago, we lived on a street right next to a primary school, and we often had issues with parents during pickup and drop-off times. Our street ended in a T-junction, with the side of the primary school at the top. We lived in the second house on the street, so parents would frequently park nearby to pick up their children, which was completely fine and normal. For some context, our house was set back from the road with a front garden, and we had a grass verge beside the road. Both of our neighbors had garden beds that extended right up to the street. We also had 2 driveways on either side of the property, which connected in a U-shape behind the front garden. Since our grass verge was accessible from both driveways, parents often saw it as an ideal parking spot. Many even parked in the driveways or across them, blocking us from coming or going during school hours. None of this was public parking. It was clearly someone's lawn and private driveway. We had plenty of run-ins with entitled parents who treated the area like their personal parking lot, and they ran over our sprinklers so many times that my mom grew to dislike them all. My mom had a particular interest in what happened around school pickup time because she finished work at 2:30 p.m. and usually got home around 3 p.m., just as the school was letting out. One unfortunate day, Mom came home to find someone had parked across the front of one of our driveways and wasn't even in their car. So, logically, she decided to use the other driveway. But there, another parent was sitting in their car, waiting for their child. Mom gave a polite little beep beep with the horn to get their attention. The parent glanced up, waved her off, assuming she wanted to use the driveway to turn around. Mom beeped again. This time, the parent got an attitude and shook their head, refusing to move. Mom, not one to be deterred, laid her hand on the horn and held it down for a solid 4 seconds. She gestured toward the house, mouthing, "I live here." Still, the parent refused to move. So, Mom did what anyone feeling a bit petty might do. Since she couldn't stop in the middle of the road with cars parked on both sides to get out and talk, she simply kept her hand on the horn until the parent finally got the message. The parent angrily reversed out of the driveway, clearly upset at being forced to give up their prime pickup spot. Once Mom parked her car, she walked to the end of the driveway because she could see the parent trying to pull back in. The parent rolled down their window, but Mom didn't let them get a word in. She gave them a piece of her mind about blocking a driveway and warned them that she'd report their license plate to the local authorities if she ever saw them doing it again. Story 6. To start, I know I might be seen as benefiting from some family connections, but it is what it is. My mom is incredibly successful in a very niche, but lucrative field of business. This allowed my dad to be a stay-at-home dad and gave my siblings and me the chance to get a great education. When I graduated from college, I decided to pursue a career in the same field as my mom. While I love her and we have a good relationship, I didn't want to be seen only as her child or receive special treatment because of her reputation. So, I chose to use my dad's surname and generally kept who my mom was to myself. I also made a point of not working directly for her. In my field and country, it's common for people to be hired for a trial period, after which either the employee or employer can end the arrangement without penalties or compensation. I got a job at a company in this niche market, where employment opportunities are limited. During my trial period, things went smoothly overall. I was able to handle several challenging situations, and one of my superiors even described me as a workhorse because I was the first one in and the last one out. Things were looking good, except for one colleague. This guy was a huge jerk. I tend to be a people pleaser and try to get along with everyone, but he wasn't having any of it. He was incredibly rude and confrontational, especially when anyone, including me, received acknowledgement or praise. He would belittle their achievements and constantly try to make himself look better by putting others down. For instance, if someone said they struggled with a task, he'd pop in and say, "Oh, I did that, and it was super easy." On top of that, he apparently made unkind remarks about my appearance and masculinity behind my back, which I later found out. His behavior wasn't exclusive to me, but he seemed especially harsh toward women. He made several sexist comments, suggesting that women, particularly mothers, didn't belong in our field and should be at home raising children. Despite his attitude, management seemed content keeping him around because he was considered a good worker with ambition. Fine. When my trial period ended, I was offered a permanent position, but I declined. I didn't enjoy being treated as a workhorse and had no desire to stay around this guy. I respectfully informed the company I wouldn't be staying, and I found work elsewhere. On my last day, I said my goodbyes. Management was sorry to see me go, and most of my colleagues wished me well. But the jerk couldn't resist making a scene, loudly saying, "Ha, told you he wouldn't stick around. Good riddance, maybe this field isn't for you either." I left without engaging because I'm not one for confrontation, and I knew I wouldn't have to deal with him again. Time passed, and I got a new job where I was much happier. I loved my work, my colleagues, and I had even been promoted. I didn't think about the jerk much, except there was an increase in job applicants from his company, which wasn't unusual given the small market. Since my boss knew I had done a trial period there, he would ask me about my experiences with any applicants. I'm generally positive about most people, so I would give my honest, usually favorable opinions. Then, guess whose application comes across my boss's desk? It's the jerk. When my boss asked for my input, I told him, "Look, I have personal feelings about this person, and I can't be objective." Knowing how positive I usually am, my boss pressed for more details. Eventually, I told him everything. As a result, the jerk didn't get hired, and I thought that was the end of it. A few days later, during a family dinner, my mom brought up that I had done a trial period at that company and asked if I knew this guy. She knew about the person I hadn't gotten along with and the things he had done. When I confirmed it was him, she made it clear she wasn't going to hire him either, especially considering his views on women. My company ended up hiring one of his former coworkers, and we got along great. That's when I found out what had happened. The jerk had been promoted, which led to several employees wanting to leave. This prompted management to investigate why strong candidates were leaving after their trial periods. It turned out the jerk's behavior was the cause. Someone had a talk with him, but he wasn't open to criticism, so they let him go. That's when he applied to my company and to my mom's. From what I understand, he no longer works in our field, likely because there aren't many employers in this niche market. I don't know what he's doing now, but I'll update if I find out. Story 7. Disclaimer: I am not First Nations, I'm very Caucasian. This will become relevant later in the story. I work at a marina on a native reserve. It's the type of marina that has a pump for boats and cars, and it's full service, meaning we go out and pump gas for the customers. We're in the same plaza as a restaurant, a tobacco shop, and a cannabis store, all on First Nations land and owned by the reserve. It's a super easy-going place, and the management takes excellent care of their employees. I couldn't ask for a better job. Yesterday, my coworker and I were going back and forth from the lakeside pump to the roadside pump. We were packed since it was Saturday of the Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, and everyone was going out on their boat or visiting their cottage on the reserve one last time before winter. On busy weekends like these, we have a police officer on the plaza to ensure people don't misbehave. Because of the virus, the reserve is only open to residents and people who own property there. People constantly try to sneak onto the reserve or park in the private marina parking lot, which is why the police officer is here to keep the troublesome tourist at bay. We'll call the cop Native Cop. Cop is a super great guy. As someone who's not fond of the police myself, I can vouch that this officer is one of the good ones. During a big rush of customers, entitled Karen pulls up. Here's some quick background. According to my boss, Karen came to the cannabis shop every other day and would always complain about bad products or some nonsense like that. So when she pulls up, instead of telling me she's getting gas, she just walks away. I call back asking if she's getting gas, and the conversation goes along these lines. Me: "Excuse me, sorry, are you getting gas?" Karen: "No," continues to walk off. Meanwhile, there's a line of cars behind her. Me: "I'm sorry, but if that's the case, you're going to have to move your car. We have other people waiting for gas." Karen continues to walk off towards the other side of the plaza. At this point, Cop sees what's going on and goes to talk to her. I see a wave of realization wash over Cop's face as he stops her. Their conversation is out of earshot, but I heard something along the lines of, "How am I supposed to know? I know my rights," from Karen, and, "Ma'am, you're banned from the premises," from Cop. They move back to the car while I'm trying to calm down people in line who are all upset that this car is in the way. Cop: "Ma'am, for the last time, you're banned from the premises for 30 days. That was 9 days ago. You still have 3 weeks until you're allowed on First Nations land." Karen: "But I wasn't on plaza property yet. I'm just at the gas shack. What right do you have to talk to me that way?" Cop: "From that tree to that tree is also native land and thus plaza property." He gestures to 2 trees on either side of the asphalt lot. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Karen: "What? So now a Native American can arrest a white woman?" She scoffs and then says, "Right, man?" as she gestures towards me. I am obviously taken aback, so I say nothing. "Traitor," she then mumbles. She continues, "You don't understand how they treated me back there." Cop: "For the last time, you've been banned from the entirety of the plaza. You can come back in 3 weeks, but you have to leave the premises immediately." Karen: "But you're not even a real cop. You don't have any authority over me. Get off your power trip." Cop: "I assure you, ma'am, that I am a part of the reserve's named police department, and if need be, I have full authority to arrest you as any other police officer would." Karen: "Oh yeah, sure, buddy. I'm suing Plaza Name, and I'm getting you all fired." She gestures to me too, who up to this point was back inside with a guy paying for his boat's gas and snacks. Cop: "That's fine, ma'am, but if you don't leave, I will have to arrest you, and if you come back within the next 3 weeks, you will also be arrested." Realizing he called her bluff, she huffs, sits back in her car, and mumbles something offensive and drives off. The next day, the day I'm writing this, it's dead slow. I've been watching Netflix all shift, until I see my coworker walking over from the parking lot to start his shift. Behind him, I see Karen being put up against a car, screaming as Cop cuffs her. It's just barely out of earshot, but I see Cop say what I'm assuming is the whole "you have the right to remain silent" speech. As this is happening, I can hear Karen yelling. Karen: "What? So I'm getting arrested by a Native American cop? What nonsense. I'm getting you fired. I'll sue everyone." Cop pulls her over to the other side of the parking lot where I'm assuming the car was parked. It was far enough away that I couldn't see it behind the other cars, but could still hear Karen yelling offensive words. Cop filled me in on the details later, saying that she came back wanting to videotape the cannabis shop and all the alleged health hazards, bad products, and health and safety issues there. Mind you, the process to open a cannabis store is meticulous. They won't let you open if anything is short of perfect, from what I understand. This store hasn't even been open for a year. All the equipment and everything is brand new. So cop gets wind of this and comes back to arrest her. As he restrains her, she starts dialing 911. I repeat, she calls the cops on the cops. Her justification: he's a Native American cop, not a real cop. So cop has to talk to the other police department to clear things up with them. Meanwhile, Karen is screaming in the background. They later released her and are extending the ban indefinitely. My coworker and I are laughing hard, as this is going to be a fun story to tell at Thanksgiving dinner.